Welcome to this edition of Plugged Inland. I'm Roger Bowman. Today, we're delving into the issue of typecasting, especially as it relates to portrayals of minorities in film, television, and plays. I'd like to invite you, our viewers, to call with your questions for our guest. Hand in hand with typecast roles is the difficulty many minorities face in obtaining roles, especially non-stereotypical roles. Let's begin with some comments from people affiliated with an acting school in the Inland Empire.
Well, see, I've always lived out in the Inland Empire, so everything I did, I pretty much had to go to Los Angeles for taking acting classes, getting help, like agent representation. So I'd always said to myself, if I ever had some success, I would bring something to the Inland Empire, because I've always been out here, and there's other people out here with that same interest, like in acting and stuff. So when I did have some success, I decided to set shop up out here and provide all that great service, but out in the Inland Empire, so I don't have to drive out to Los Angeles. I can share with you that I say in the 80s and early 90s, there wasn't as many opportunities, but there really is now. It doesn't matter how you look, what size you are, what age. There's so many different roles now. There's everyone out there, but I think it depends on your look. You could be shopped not just one ethnicity, depending on your look. So I can have a Latin actor or Latin actress that can play Caucasian. They can play different ethnicities. It just depends on who they are, on how far I can shop them. But also, there's a lot of roles that are open ethnicity, like they're not concerned about the race, so it's pretty open.
I think they're pretty open. A lot of roles I've been up to is like open ethnicity. So I go and I see African Americans, I see Hispanics, Caucasians. So it depends. It depends on the project and the type they're looking for, I guess you could say. So it varies a lot.
When I was doing an audition for a music video, they told me to dance. And so they're like, okay, just go crazy. And so I went nuts. I'm white, I can't dance. And so I just went for it, and they're like, oh, that was really good, I really like that. I'm just like, wow, that's okay. And then next thing I know, I get the part, I'm like, interesting.
If you look at a lot of primetime shows, there's not that many lead Black ladies, except for, Kerry Washington, Taraji, and now I think Megan Good. So I do know it's very difficult and very hard, but I know that there are opportunities and the industry is kind of changing, so I'm just hoping that I can break that mold and join them. They've been very good. Lately, like this new year, I've gotten a lot of calls for hardcore roles, the gangbanger, the prisoner. So they are kind of stereotyping me.
I think it depends on the casting director and then also on the person. It's just I think no matter what your color is, if your acting's right where it should be, or if you're exceeding the top, then they should look past that. But I'm not a casting director, so I couldn't directly say, but that's my opinion, I think.
I would say 60% of the stuff I get called in for is Italian background, because I'm Sicilian and I'm Mexican. So I come from that background.
I play another troublemaker, Armenian gang member.
I'm happy to welcome to the studio UCR instructor and playwright Rickerby Hinds. Thank you for being here, Rickerby.
No problem, thanks.
So I loved Mario's comment, our last student there, that said he was the Armenian gangster.
Yes.
I want to talk tonight about this typecasting and stereotypes and how it affects people's penetration into the arts. Okay. He's the Armenian gangster. There's the Russian mafia,
right,
recently on Body of Proof with that heavy, thick, stereotyped Russian accent. Do you see that from your visibility as a playwright?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things that you have to look at in the arts is that when you're looking at movies and television, a lot of times you're looking at shorthand. You're trying to say as much as you can with as little. Meaning, if I can immediately do a shot of someone and the audience can automatically identify, this is this type of a character, then you've eliminated the need to explain or to have dialogue say, oh, this is a gangster who is, you know, about to go on trial and who's about to be defended by a lawyer to show how great of a lawyer they are to defend this, you know, this type of a person. So in looking for those shortcuts, what you end up doing is pulling, you know, these characters basically from a stock. And so I think that kind of is where it begins, with trying to say more with less. And once we've become acclimated to who represents what, then it becomes easier to just go, oh, you know, we need to just show that this is who is the toughest gangbanger we can have? Well, let's see, let's get a black guy with tattoos and a beanie. And so once again, it's a shortcut, and it serves the greater purpose of the work, but it also it may also serve to reinforce those stereotypes.
So if you happen to be an African American with tattoos, do you find that the only roles you can get are as the gangbanger?
Well, I mean, once again, if you're dealing with those pulling those stock characters from off the shelf, then more than likely the chances of you know, portraying a lawyer or portraying just a guy becomes more limited, and it becomes a less likelihood that you'll be able to play that type of a role. So it's a matter of circumstances. It's a matter of the way that this particular medium works, and you know, it's just a matter of the reality that we use shorthand, we use shortcuts to depict or to convey what it is that we're doing in these art forms.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing? We need some kind of a shorthand, otherwise you'd have to belabor and explain the background.
And this is the dilemma, right? When you're trying to tell a story that has a spine, and you need other elements, you need other parts of this spine in order to convey, you know, the benevolent lawyer who finds the prisoner on death row to show how great a benevolent lawyer I am. Well, who would be the best person to convey that? And so, once again, without making the story about the person who's being defended, you would use a shortcut. You would use those ways of conveying, this is what this person's character is, this is what this lawyer's character is. So that becomes the reason why those things happen. Now, is it a good or a bad thing? I often joke when my wife and I will sit and we'll watch and we'll see, you know, whether it's a LA Law or a CSI, and we'll see a black character on there, and you know, they'll be dead or in prison pretty soon, and we'll go, well, you know, they got to pay their rent this month, or they you know, and it's kind of a joking way of saying that these are people who are wanting to be actors. This is the profession that they've chosen, and they still have to make a living, right? So those kind of choices have to be made on a constant basis. And you know, when you are up for roles and you're up for parts, and you know, eventually the rent is due, then you may decide, you know what, I'll be prisoner number 8 who says, you know, what up?
Okay. Being that this is a live show,
yes,
and we're
yes.
driven by our audience, I'm going to go ahead and take an email question from Jeff of Apple Valley. Are auditions open to the public or just for students? And then in this case, he's talking about you as a playwright.
Yeah, at UCR, the auditions are limited to the students on campus, any student on campus. However, the type of work that I do work that involves both students on campus as well as anyone in the community. So when I cast a play, the play that I'm currently touring called Dreamscape, I have it's a 2-person piece, and one of them is a former student, and the other one is someone who never attended UCR. He's a beatboxer from Pomona.
Explain
who I cast in
beatboxing.
Someone called it vocal percussionist. The other day we did the play, and they said, oh, you're a vocal percussionist. Beatboxing is essentially making beats or sounding like a drum machine, essentially, just using your mouth and a microphone. And so this person, his name is John Merchant, plays the role of a beatboxer in the play Dreamscape. And he essentially embodies parts of this character through beatboxing, spoken word, and song samples. So it's pretty, when you see it live, when you see beatboxing live, someone who's good, it's amazing what can be done and how much storytelling can be told just by using that particular hip hop element.
So I'm going to challenge you, Rickerby.
Yes.
As someone who casts,
Yes.
do you use those same shortcuts?
When I'm casting, I purposely think about who it is that I'm putting in the role, and I do my best to look at the person's talent. And so here's an example. The play that I'm doing right now is called Dreamscape. It's about a young woman, Taisha Miller, who was shot by the police in Riverside back in 1998.
I remember the story.
Yes. If you see pictures of Taisha Miller and you see the young ladies that I've cast in the play, they are nowhere close to that character. The reason I cast the young ladies in the play was because they were the ones who could do the role the best. And in spite of the fact that I actually had to take out a line in the play itself in order for someone who was not as dark pigmentation-wise as Taisha Miller, was not a problem for me, because overall what they brought to the table warranted that.
So your casting is a true meritocracy.
Well, because part of it is because I'm writing and directing and essentially touring and producing the play on my own. As you start to bring other people into the mix and other things come into play, whether it's money, whether it's a piece that's being viewed by a larger audience, a different demographic, then these things come into play even more so. But for me, when I'm dealing with theater, and I'm fortunate to be able to make these kind of choices because I'm in academia and I have that as a foundation, it makes it, I realize that I'm in a position of privilege when it comes to deciding, you know what, I'm going to cast this play this way, regardless of what an audience or a producer or someone who's bringing me into their theater space might think. So I have that freedom. As you progress into these industries, whether you're looking at theater and you're looking at major shows, either in LA or on Broadway or in other places, then you have other factors that start to play a role. I don't know if Spider-Man ever happened in New York, but I think that
the famous one with all the problems?
The one with all the problems. I think Julie Taymor is brilliant. But I don't know who was cast as Spider-Man, but I would think the Spider-Man in the play looked a lot like the Spider-Man in the movie, who looked a lot like the Spider-Man in the comic books. So, it's those are decisions that have to be made outside of what would seem to be the right or the traditional decision. You would have to step out and go, you know what, I'm going to take Spider-Man and I'm going to colorblind cast this, which becomes its own kind of conversation about colorblind casting and is it warranted and does it work?
If somebody, I think, is completely indistinguishable, let's say, I mean, they could be of any race, any color, but they don't have unique characteristics that would otherwise typecast them, it seems like they might have an easier time to go, cross-racial roles than, say, somebody who, for instance, all bad guys have acne scars. Seems to be the case. So you never see the good guy with the acne. It's always the perfect complexion.
Wow, I hadn't thought about acne scar casting.
Well, there's the scar, but you can explain that as bad guys get in knife fights.
Yes. When you're dealing with broad strokes, when you're dealing with television and film, whose primary goals when it comes to appealing is we are trying to appeal to the greatest number of people. Maybe not appeal. We want the greatest number of people to watch our show or to go to our movie. Then you start to look at what are the things that will bring in the greatest number of people. And that's where you get into, you know, who are these people who are coming in? And when you go to a play or to a movie, you're hoping to see yourself somewhere in that presentation. I know that when I go to plays, when I go to a movie, I always find myself trying to identify, if I was in this world, who would I be? Which is why I don't necessarily like period movies a lot, because I always see myself holding a tray somewhere in a corner. You know. But
that's harsh.
I'm just saying, you know, 9 out of 10 times, brother was holding a tray somewhere. But you try to identify, you try to figure out where you would be in this world. You know, how your existence, your reality, would manifest itself in this world. And you know, the greatest number of people who could identify with these characters, I think when you're a producer, you're going, okay, this is the look, or this is the character, these are the folks that would allow for the greatest number of people to access this work.
Okay, so James Gandolfini is the Italian mobster.
Yes.
Does that help or hurt Italian Americans, and by extension African Americans, by getting the caricatured roles, or any of our ethnicities?
Wow. When your understanding of a person or people comes from a particular source, and that source tells you some particular things, then it takes you interacting with those people or with that person to demystify that. I hadn't met anyone from India until I went to UCR as a student. And I met met someone who became a good friend of mine. And I got to know a little bit about what it meant to be someone from India, what your relationship was with your parents, what their expectations were of you when you were away at school, when you would call, like all these different things. And of course that was to a particular person in a particular family. But for me, it gave me an insight into demystifying some of those misguiding stereotypes, whatever you want to call them, that I had about someone from India. You know, whether they had a dot in the middle of the forehead, or what, you know, and a lot of those things were demystified because I met someone from that space.
Let me stop you for a moment.
Yes.
We have another email, and this is Amy from Redlands, who asked, how does the '98 shooting compare to your screenplay? Or rather, why did it inspire you to write your screenplay?
Yeah. The Dreamscape is, how does it compare? So first of all, it's a play. Dreamscape is a play. And the play itself is not a reenactment of what happened, but what my play set out to do thematically, Dreamscape, is to explore the historic relationship between African Americans and the police. And so what is explored in the story is not necessarily just about what happened to this young woman, but you know, the question is posed in the play itself: if I look differently, would things have turned out differently? And the fact that I looked the way I looked, and once again, these images and these preconceived ideas of what I must be sitting in this car, came along with the officers who came to help me out, play a huge role in, I believe, in what happened. So yeah, so the play itself is it condenses time into the amount of time that it took to shoot her 12 times. And so the play is in 12 scenes, and each scene represents a bullet, and that bullet is manifested through movement, through what she might have been thinking at that time, and through the coroner's report. So it's non-realistic in that way, and it's not a documentary about Tyisha Miller. It's just based on that incident.
Do you draw a conclusion in the play?
No. What's great about when people see the play, it's, you know, I did my best to be balanced in what I chose to include and exclude in the play. And so in the play itself, it really, thematically, or what I wanted to look at, or if I wanted an audience to leave with anything, it would be with the sense of the loss of a life. Another human being was lost. Could this have turned out differently? And I do my best to be balanced, and we're inclined to lean one way or another. I've been pulled over, and all those things have happened. So I'm sure my politics are in there. I'm very sure my politics are in there somewhere.
Okay, let me pull you from the very serious subject of Dreamscape back to where you were talking about the stereotype, for instance, of those from India. Mike Myers played a comedy where he was a guru from India, and the movie bombed and his career kind of stalled, but nonetheless, we think it's perfectly okay to draw on these caricatures when it's a comedy.
Yeah. Well, when you're looking at those basic dramatic structures or stories, comedies, dramas, a quest journey, they have different types of rules that apply to them. And I think within the context of a comedy, we take more leeway in making fun of in order to make a point. Sacha Baron Cohen has done some things that have, gotten him in trouble, but in interesting ways have gotten us to look at ourselves and to look at certain things that we may take for granted through the use of comedy and through the use of even going to extremes in how characters are portrayed. So I'm not someone who's saying, minority characters or black characters should always be portrayed as this way. The dilemma comes in when you have limited representations of who those folks are, and those limited representations continue to perpetuate certain beliefs or myths or stereotypes. Then that becomes the problem, because like the young people who were looking at going in for auditions, when you walk into an audition, it affects you in that those producers may go, oh, he or she looks this way, they must only be right for this particular role. And you'll hear the stories of Morgan Freeman when he did Shawshank Redemption, that the role was written for someone with red hair, because the reason they call Morgan Freeman, right?
Yeah, Red.
They called him Red, and he talks about the fact that he wanted the role to remain as it was written, in order to show that, yes, I can play a different role. The interesting thing is when we're talking about colorblind casting and playing different roles, a lot of times they become roles that, someone who may be white or Caucasian is playing a different race or a different ethnicity. And so the idea behind colorblind casting was initially to kind of say, okay, if we're doing Shakespeare, or if we're doing, we talked earlier, something where the person's ethnicity or race is irrelevant, then how do we cast those roles? Or are we automatically inclined to cast just a regular guy? In our minds, when you say just a regular guy, it may be just a regular white guy. And then, all of his friends, most of his friends may more than likely would be white. And so unless you are being proactive about undoing that, deconstructing, they like to say in academia a lot, but you're kind of undoing that paradigm that's already existing. And you have to be proactive about it. It's because if we stay, when I sit down to write a play, my characters start off, most of them are African American characters. And so I have to be proactively thinking about, what is it that I'm trying to say with this play? Who are the characters, or what types of roles would best convey the theme that I'm trying to convey? And make myself think outside of, there'll be 4 brothers on stage doing some brother stuff. I think kind of.
Okay, let's take a moment. I want to hear from another UCR professor. This one, Dr. Tiffany Lopez, a playwright at UCR, who also talks about typecasting and about bringing the Latino voice into the plays.
My educational journey, sometimes I refer to myself as an accidental academic, because I'm the first in my family to go to college, and it wasn't something growing up that I had firmly on my horizon. It was more of a hope than actually a destination. And I left home at the age of 15, fleeing catastrophic levels of violence, a lot of mental illness, a lot of alcoholism, and physical violence as a result of those things. And I had a real cognizant understanding that if I stayed, I wasn't sure if I would make it through to adulthood. So I left home. I had that seed inside me, and I was able to live with a friend, and her parents said I could stay there as long as I held a job, and I was able to find employment at a Burger King and start working my way up in the fast food restaurant. And I discovered that I really enjoyed that work, and my dream became I wanted to become a franchisee, and discovered that in order to do that, the preference was that you had some schooling, some college, and an associate's degree from a community college. I really didn't know what that was, but I knew there was a local community college, and went there, and the world cracked open for me. I think my entire career, it's going on almost 20 years here at the University of California, Riverside, which for me has been a powerful home because the majority of our students come from families that one might describe as minorities in some way, whether it's very, very working class or a background of poverty, or we're a Hispanic serving institution. That's by demographics, not so much design. I think what's been a powerful home for me is identifying with the most of our students are the first in their families to go through college, and I keenly understand what kinds of questions and struggles that they have as a part of their coming of age through the college experience. And it's quite an incredible journey that they're here, and our goal is to get them to the end of the experience and have them not just say, oh, finally I finished my bachelor's degree, the world is going to open up to me, but to say, no, now you have to really imagine why you're doing it, how you're doing it, for whom you're doing it, for the future generations. And I think the arts, for me, the arts are very powerfully transformative because the arts give so many skills of creative thinking that we know the business community demands, people who are agile thinkers and critical thinkers, but also creative thinkers. But I think it also gives skills of empathy and reasoning and other skills that we know right now in the next generation are very much in crisis in some way, especially because of being plugged in literally and being so fractured from just being able to engage with other people in an interpersonal way. One of the ways, in my classroom, I try to create a language that has the students understand the relationship between their personal storytelling and the work that they're there to do. But recently, I've been working on a play adaptation of Tomas Rivera's classic novel, And the Earth Did Not Devour Him. And part of what drives that is, as the Rivera chair, really wanting to have a closer connection to Rivera's work, but also remembering how powerful that novel was for me as the granddaughter of migrant farm workers. And it was one of the first books I ever read that explained to me the parts of my history that were, my family history, that were so painful and burdensome that my parents couldn't talk about the fact that they were children of migrant farm workers, that my father that was too painful for him to talk about those years. And so in reading Rivera's book, it was like filling up a missing link in a missing branch in my family tree. So what I've done what my goal has been in writing an adaptation of Rivera's work is to, for the campus community, which because we're Hispanic serving, I know that our students will feel that connection with the work and the way that I felt connected with the work.
This character gave me a whole new appreciation for what she does for me, the sacrifices of her coming here at 14 and working so hard every day for me to be here. And I'm first generation college student, and those wounds have been passed down to me, and I see that with this play, and Dr. Lopez said it one time in class and stuck with me. Through theater, I've been able to find the wounds of that have been passed down. And
whether or not they come from a family of migrant farm workers, I know the violence of poverty, the struggle to obtain education that book thematizes and talks about, that those are things that really will speak very powerfully to our students.
I think there's still a lot of underrepresented or Latinos or Chicanos out there. So there's not as much that we have seen, and I think this work and putting this out there, it proves, that there's, like, for example, like Dr. Lopez has been one of my biggest inspirations as I came to college, of how powerful you can be, how, knowledge can actually be a tool that you can use.
But I also wanted to use the creative work to create a work that would travel and go to other university theaters, because one of the struggles is that Latino theater still isn't an organic part of the curriculum of American theater studies. I think that if you ask me what would be my goal 10 years in the future, it would be that I would see this developed into a fully mounted script and production that would become something universities would gravitate to wanting to do in their university theaters. I think that would be my first and foremost goal, and then of course going out into other community theaters, that would be a really lovely thing to see happen, because it would allow to bring people back to the literature and to see Latinos on stage beyond stereotypes.
We're back live with UCR professor and playwright Rickerby Hinds. Dr. Lopez was talking about in the video bringing the Latino voice into plays, and obviously we'd want to see them in films and television with greater penetration than we see now. Yeah. You and I were talking during the video about African Americans, for instance, being depicted as in leadership roles more and more in movies and television. It used to be Morgan Freeman, as the president, preceding, Obama, of course, and even as the speaker who takes the leadership role in the new one, Olympus Has Fallen.
Yeah. It's, I think it's a great thing to see those types of things happening, and I have. So oftentimes when I watch TV shows with judges, I always joke that there's just a proliferation of black judges on TV, and not a lot of black lawyers, so how do they become judges, right? But that's neither here nor there. I think it's a great thing to start to see African Americans in these roles, and as we're discussing, I do think that Latino, because we were talking about a Latino president, which we haven't seen.
Right, we were contrasting this idea of, we're seeing in NCIS, the director of the agency is an African American. In oh my gosh, Castle, the captain of the precinct, is an African American. Where are the Latinos that are cast as leaders?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of missing element in both, when we look at television as well as films. And as Tiffany mentioned, also in academia, when you're looking at what is considered the canon of plays that are considered, for seasons throughout the U.S., and what parts of that canon include, Latino plays, as well, and I think with African Americans, there has been more inroad made into becoming part of that canon. But then again, the other dilemma becomes, well, if we're doing an August Wilson play, and we don't have enough African Americans on campus to play all the roles in the play, then do we do colorblind casting, and what does that do to the play itself, and how does that change, the theme and the message and what's being said in this particular play? So there's so many parts to this issue, and I think one of the functions of academia is to bring up these questions and to start having conversations, and not just conversations, but proposing ways of creating solutions for these issues.
Well, Rickerby, let
yes.
me ask, how many, I'll frame it this way.
Okay.
How much is it impacted by those who are behind the lens? The casting directors, the directors, maybe even others?
Yeah, yeah. I think they're probably as much of an influence, if not more of an influence, than the creative parts of the industry. Meaning, you know, if we're looking at, so if we keep pulling backwards from who's in front of the camera to the director, let's just say, who would have the influence on the casting, but also you start looking at the producers, who are the ones who are putting up the money so that the director can stand behind the camera or to the side. Then you start to, you know, then you start to realize that it's not just a director saying, oh, I don't want this person here, but it's the person, the people putting up the funds, putting up the money, saying, well, what is going to give me the greatest return on my investment? And I think when we start to look at it that way, even if we look at, you know, the music industry, if you look at rap and the transition of rap going from one type of rap music to where it is now, the question is, what is going to give me the greatest return on my investment?
Okay, so break that down a little. You're a playwright, and your genre most of the time is hip hop in rap.
Hip hop theater.
Okay,
yeah.
so what are the genres of rap, and where have we evolved?
Well, we, you know, if a brief look at the music of hip hop culture, the rap is, you can look at it starting off as a feel-good kind of party, you know, Sugar Hill Gang, braggadocio, playing the dozens, showing vocal dexterity on top of beats. And then from there you had an era where you had very politically driven in the 80s and early 90s with Public Enemy and Boogie Down Production and all these artists who were talking about freeing South Africa, who were talking about, you know, taking pride in who you are and how you look, who were not wearing any jewelry at all. As a matter of fact, if you wore jewelry, you were somewhat ostracized. They were wearing maps of Africa, and they were wearing, you know, leather and beads. And then we evolved into the gangster era that many people credit NWA with kind of beginning, and it now evolving into kind of a pimp, I used to sell drugs, but now I sell records kind of era, and I have to wear the most expensive jewelry and get some diamonds as long as children didn't lose their arms mining these diamonds. At least that's what I'm saying. Then, you know, I'm okay. So it's evolved to that, and so when you...
Rickerby, I'm gonna loop you back.
Loop me back.
Okay, the ability for the genre to evolve, is that not in part because a lot of the producers, the people behind the mixing boards, are the African Americans that were successful in the previous genre?
Yeah, you would want to think that. So here's the thing. Radio stations play music. Radio stations aren't owned by those producers who are producing the music. Radio stations say, this is the kind of music we're going to play on this station, and if you don't create this kind of music, then you won't get airplay. Therefore, the music goes in a direction that will get them airplay, which in turn will allow them to wear 2 chains. That's 2 chains. Somebody's gonna call and say, 2 chains, dude, leave him alone. But the point is that those who are in control, I wrote a, it's so funny because every time I say I wrote a play, in Living Color, speaking of black people on TV, you used to have a character who would sing on the corner and you would be talking and he'd say, hey, I wrote a song about it, want to hear it? Here it go. But I wrote a play about the music industry. And in doing the research, discovered that there are essentially 5 companies that control this industry. And so you have all these artists who have a record label here and there, but distribution is actually what controls it. And so those who decide what gets distributed are the ones who decide what the music sounds like.
So is that also going to be true in the other arts? The plays and Broadway, theater, television?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would hope that it wouldn't be the case. And in the case, you know, it's very overt right now with commercial hip hop what is being played on the radio. it's you know it's glaring to see, and actually for when I teach my classes and I talk to young people who are into the music that's not on the radio, I discover all of this amazing work that's being done. Artists who are talking about things that are relevant, who are not called, oh, I can't say bad words on TV, but they're not calling women derogatory names, right? They're not just talking about how much jewelry they're wearing, but they're actually being politically aware and talking about different things. But those artists are not making it to the radio. And so going back to the question, do I think this is the direction that film and television is headed? I don't think so. I think what's great right now that's happening is things like YouTube and other means of putting work out there that can reach a large audience is going to shift the way this thing continues to evolve. At least that's what I believe. I hope.
So how do we get from the typecast, the shorthand version of somebody from Russia by having them be a Russian gangster who has that thick accent and that particular look? How do we get the information conveyed and yet not have to have people that fit that role, not have to have the person, if they're Italian looking, they have to be a mafioso?
Yeah, I think it begins with the point of departure of the work itself. Meaning, if we're still telling the same stories and just plugging in different ethnicities into those stories, then I think it becomes a more difficult thing to accomplish than if we start at the beginning and we look at what it is that we're trying to talk about, what it is that we're trying to say thematically, and then is there a way? It's a different question. It may not be who can play these roles in order to get me to the point as quickly as possible. But the question may be, is there a way for me to tell this same story using different characters than I would begin with in my traditional way of doing it? So is there a way versus how do I?
The reconceptualization has to begin at the screenplay, has to begin at the writing.
Yeah, because the dilemma becomes, if I've written a screenplay and I've conceptualized a screenplay for an all-American cast, which as soon as I say that, there's certain things that come to mind. Then it becomes a matter of changing it. Let's go back into the script and change it so that it can fit others, instead of at the beginning of the script.
Or option B is we have enough roles where the all-American is a Caucasian, a Latino, and an African American, and a Native American, and all these different genres, and they are born in America, they're all American, and pretty soon all-American doesn't evoke a particular caricature in your mind.
And that's changing the definition, right? I had a professor years ago who talked about changing the paradigm all the time, and I was an undergrad, so I had no idea. I had no idea what a paradigm was, but I'm like, yeah, let's change it. But once I figured out what he was talking about, I realized that it's a shift in what we immediately perceive when we hear certain things. So if that shift hasn't happened, just like I said with All American, the play that I'm doing, I have a play called Blackballing, and I have a character, and her description is All American. That's the description of the character. And it's purposefully written that way so that the point that's being made about preconceived ideas is made when we cast a young blonde cheerleader, which is what we end up casting in the play, right? Because that's the entire point. And I did it purposely to make a point that we have these preconceived ideas of what a gangster is. So when we say a gangster, well, if we use the R, then we might be, it may be the 30s or it may be Prohibition era. But if we say he's a gangster, then we know, okay, it's probably a brother. And like it's probably,
you're relaxing the R there, right?
If you put the A at the end, it's probably going to be a brother, and he's probably going to be wearing some type of a hat. But we have these preconceived paradigms that we function inside of. And if we don't move outside of that, then we'll continue to have this conversation.
If I think, you mentioned cheerleader, if I think cheerleader, I do not think a male. Yet there's plenty of male cheerleaders. I mean, the function of rallying a group around a cause, be it sports or whatever, is not limited in this case to, as you cast, the blonde female cheerleader.
Absolutely. And so my understanding of what an all-American cheerleader has been shaped by the arts, right? It's been shaped by the things that I've seen, in the same way that these other stereotypes that we have been shaped by the arts, which is the importance of understanding and looking at the fact that we are perpetuating certain things, and those things that we perpetuate have results. You know, black males in prison are I think I might have said this before, I have this theory, there are only two reasons why there's so many black men in prison. One, black people are predisposed towards violence, or two, there's something wrong with the legal system. Now, there may be a third option, I haven't figured that one out yet, but I think the media has something to do with this. When you see a young black man with a hoodie on, chances are he might have been in a movie, Skittles, and had he been in a movie, he would have been a gangbanger, and had he been a gangbanger, he would have had a gun. Therefore, I need to shoot him before he shoots me. So it's, you know.
So that gets to an important point. A lot of people perceive those in the field of the arts as doing less serious work than, say, those that start companies, you know, small business, the backbone of employment in America, and et cetera. And yet the arts is communication. It's what influences our culture. You were talking about how the media shapes our views.
Yeah.
So what you're doing, even in your role as a playwright and as an instructor of others in the arts, is helping to set a course for how we're going to shape perceptions in America in the coming generation.
And this is, you know, as being in academia and being in Southern California, a place where there's this kind of dichotomous existence where we see the industry that the arts creates as a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Yet I still find myself, you know, on campus trying to justify the fact that, you know, theater matters, or you know, these other forms of art matter. And the fact is that, you know, when we look at why we create businesses and we work so hard so that we can make money, we create businesses and we work hard so that we can make money so that we can do what? Do something in the arts, you know, whether it's sports or whether it's going to plays, or, you know, we get to enjoy the beautiful part of life, which is what we create as art. I was just plugging artists that was my own.
Yes, I noticed. I'm going to jump over to one of our viewers sent an email. Steve from Fontana says, do you have any advice for actors afraid of being stereotyped?
Oh, wow. I don't know if I have any advice if you're afraid of being stereotyped. I think if you believe that you are an actor, that's what you're supposed to do, then you push forward in doing it, and the thing that you do is you gain the skills that will allow you to do any of the roles that you're given. I often talk about being a playwright. You know, if this is something I would have chosen.
Rickerby,
I'm
cutting you right off,
I need some more.
because exactly in the same topic are some students that themselves have comments on the type of roles and what they're doing in the arts.
It's been through plays that are relatable to me, plays like this, plays I've never read before in high school or in any other class for that matter. And it's been through theater, and I've been able to heal. So, which is why I'm so invested in this work and so invested in bringing it to others, because I know that it's an opportunity for them to heal from these wounds that we all share together as a culture.
I grew up in the Imperial Valley, and that's like all farms. And my dad is not a mobster, but my abuelito was. And my dad actually he used to work on the tractors in the fields. And I really relate to the part when the boy is struggling with his dad with sunstroke, because my dad was actually he was stabbed in the leg while working on a tractor, he fell and he almost died. And I think that it's important to appreciate what people do who work on farms, because they give up a lot for us just to feed us.
With you, I've learned so much about this area that it's become interesting to me, and I enjoy learning about it because I had no idea about some of these stories that people experience, and we should let everyone know what excuse me, what these people have gone through, because this is them and they do so much for us that we don't appreciate what they've done and what they've gone through. So we all have something to tell and we all have something to offer. So I think that's something that I like about this type of work.
As a Latina, I think it's really important that we see ourselves in the media and not as just stereotypes, because these are people that have struggles that are very, very real, and they're not something that you see all the time. So I think that this is something that's great about this work, is that you do get to see their struggles.
I think his work really speaks to that. It speaks to, this is where we came from, this was the struggles, this is where we're trying to forge a path from, and I see that in my own life. I see the path that my dad had to make for me, and now I'm here, and my end goal is, I always look to my younger siblings who are 9 and 10, and I tell them, you know, I'm at college, you can do that, that's for you, that's going to happen for you. And when I approach a work, I think about them, and I think about my dad, and that's how I progress forward. And I just think this really shows like the family, the community, and I think that needs to get out there to more people, because more people need to have exposure to things that assure you that there's something you're moving towards.
We're back live with UCR professor and playwright Rickerby Hinds. Rickerby, let's wrap up this show by talking about your experience as an instructor as opposed to a playwright.
Yeah. One of the greatest things about teaching at UCR is the diversity that we have on the campus. And being one of the most diverse college campuses in the country and the most diverse UC college, university, I find it, I teach a class with 100 students. It's a hip hop theater class. And what's phenomenal for me in this class is to see the diversity when I'm teaching this class. And the thing that unifies them is their love and appreciation for this cultural phenomenon we call hip hop, and then in creating theater with it. And I do an exercise in the class that is always very cool, where I have them, it may not seem cool, but I have them come to the board and write profanity. And I have them write profanity in different languages. And then I have them speak the profanity in the different languages. And the point of the exercise is to talk about the power of words and the fact that words mean things and simultaneously mean nothing. But at the same time, it's an opportunity to see how many different cultures and ethnicities and different groups of people exist in this space, get along in this space, and work together to create art, essentially, in the class.
So at this point, your takeaway is going to be, what I'm hearing, is that there is enough diversity in the arts, in the feeder system of the universities, that we're going to see this greater amalgamation in the future, a more colorblind casting. And so anybody that is a minority, despite the need for that off-the-shelf typecast, that shorthand, will have the opportunity in the future to play lots of roles and show America that, you know, people with tattoos can be judges.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's going to happen probably sooner than later.
All right, you know, that's all the time we have. I'd like to thank our guest, Professor Rickerby Hinds, for being here today. Join us next week as we examine healthcare in the Inland Empire. I'm Roger Bowman. I want to thank you for watching Plugged Inland. That was a great show.
I'm in the news program at my school, so I do that every morning. We had a speaking part in the Hollywood Revelations.
I did background for Victorious, and the part I was in, I had to act like I was in a concert singing and super excited, jumping around and stuff, yelling.
I've done a music video for Kid Rock. I've done a show for the Military Channel. I've done a couple musicals. So I've been doing a lot more than what I would have done up in Utah.
I think I've been on a bully audition before, and then I've been on to a skateboarding audition because I like to skateboard. It's like my second hobby. And then I've been on like the foster kid audition and I recently just went on audition as well. I went on audition for just like a drug dealer.
Okay, I've done, well, when I was 17, I was in a movie called Zoom with Tim Allen and Courtney Cox. I played one of the kids in the classroom who's supposed to look surprised when the kid goes up there and turns invisible. I've done a commercial, well, a web commercial, and I've done 2 commercials. One of them was a web commercial and another one was digital. I forgot which company. It was either Sony or Canon, but like it was one of those commercials. I was supposed to play like a crazy fan in the crowd that keeps trying to get the attention of the starlet. And I've done a music video.
First thing I did was a commercial, an Axe body spray commercial. You know, I played a lot of characters. I've been very fortunate. You know, I guess I got a good look. You know, supposedly. That's what my mentor.
I've done several TV shows, movies, commercials. My latest one was a TV show, well not a TV show, but a movie called Feels So Good. And that one's hitting the theaters soon. I play a character in Santiago. And I had a pleasure just working alongside the writer that wrote the movie, Good Luck Chuck, Josh Stober. He wrote several movies like Piranha 3D, Conception, Sword Over Girls. He's done a lot, and I had Jamie Kennedy as well in this movie, and Hutch Daniel, Rock Anthony from Glee. Hutch Daniel is the recurring actor on Zeke and Luther on the Disney show.